Let's start by introducing the idea of virtuous leadership. And we can't talk about virtuous leadership without talking about leadership in general. So during my work in leadership, and if you've done any reading on leadership, you're going to realize that primarily leadership education or leadership literature is written around the lives of people who were great leaders. So you have books written by people who've led: Lee Iacocca, Oprah, Steve Jobs, Dean Smith. Any UNC basketball fans? One, two. All right. And for bonus points, who can tell me the number one most cited leader in leadership literature? Anyone have a guess? Who was that?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Not Teddy Roosevelt. And I guess this is more modern business leadership kind of stuff. Anybody? It is Jack Welch. 10 points to Gryffindor, because we have Jack Welch and Jack Welch and Jack Welch. And so what we tend to do is we look at leadership and we think of it as a story of great leaders, of people who are highly successful. And if we're not careful, our work on leadership can become so focused on success that we miss the point of what leaders should be. And we hope that we are creating good leaders, not just effective leaders here. In fact, I'd like to tell you a story about one of the most famous leaders in society. This man was born into poverty. He had some real special abilities that people found at an early age, and they developed him. Became a great military leader. He led massive construction projects. At one point, he was the number 2 person in the most powerful government in the galaxy. And that, of course, is Darth Vader. We don't want any students to become Darth Vader. And if you fact check me, that's all accurate to Star Wars. Trust me, I know. So we don't want to have Darth Vader leaders that we develop. We don't want to create students who are effective and successful, but bad people, right? Anybody in here hope to develop the next Darth Vader? Good, that would be disheartening if someone said that. So we want to make sure that as we look at leadership, we're not looking at the Darth Vaders of the world. And Darth Vader comes up the first time I was teaching about leadership. I teach a class, Lawyers as Leaders, at the University of Richmond School of Law. And we asked students to describe what leadership was. And a student offered up that leadership is the opposite of Darth Vader, which I think they were trying to be silly, but it was a pretty thought-provoking question. And the reality is most of our leadership training and our leadership literature is not the opposite of Darth Vader. Sometimes it's actually helping create Darth Vaders. So today we do want to make sure our leadership, as we look at virtuous leadership, is not Darth Vader. So if someone asks you what is virtuous leadership, this is not on your handout, you can say the opposite of Darth Vader. And I think you'll be pretty accurate. But we may need a slightly more accurate definition of virtuous leadership than just the opposite of Darth Vader, however effective that may be. So as we look at this, we want to define first, how do other people define leadership? These are all quotes on leadership from people who I highly respect, and I think they're good quotes. Leadership is the art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. It's from Barry Posner and James Kouzes from the Leadership Challenge. Leadership is a process whereby an individual influences others to achieve a common goal. Peter Northouse. A leader is anyone who takes responsibility for finding the potential in people and processes and has the courage to develop that potential. Leadership is communicating to another person their worth and potential so clearly that they see it in themselves. That's Stephen Covey. These are all big names in leadership, and these are really helpful definitions. But here at the Program for Leadership and Character in the professional schools, we've come up with a slightly tighter one that I think will help you remember it. And it's just that leadership is a relationship of intentional influence. Now, I used to teach kids, and so not that you all are children, but it's early in the morning and 80% of you are asleep. I can see it in your eyes. That's okay. So we're going to do something here. We're all going to say it together. Can we do that? Can we do that?
Yes.
All right, we'll wake up in time and we'll get going. I believe in you. I believe in each and every one of you. So we'll say it together. Leadership is a relationship of intentional influence. We'll say it one more time with feeling. Leadership is a relationship of intentional influence. One more time. No, I'm just kidding. We won't do it again. Some of you were excited, and I appreciate that. But what this shows us is that leadership is not dependent on positional authority. Is positional authority helpful in leadership? It is. Liz can fire me at any time. She has that positional authority. I think. Yeah, she does. She's being modest, but she could absolutely fire me. So, everybody, positive reviews at the end of this. But leadership does not require positional authority. You can lead someone from the bottom of the organization, you can lead up. You can influence people because it's just this relationship of intentional influence. So leadership is not dependent on positional authority. And this is important. I was presenting the idea of leadership to the Board of Visitors at the law school. And one of the people on the board very helpfully said, maybe we shouldn't train law students to be leaders because they're not going to be leaders for years and years into their career. And I appreciate that feedback. It was very well intentioned, but I don't think it's correct. I think each and every one of us has the opportunity to be a leader in every relationship that we're in right now. Our family relationships, our friend groups, our professional relationships. You have the opportunity to lead regardless of what your title is, because leadership's not about positional authority, it's not about domination, it's about influence. And so leadership is a relationship of intentional influence. It shows us that it's not about positional authority. It's also not automatic. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that you get crowned at the beginning of life. I often talk about Tim Tebow. Any Tim Tebow fans? He is the favorite child of every homeschooler who's ever lived. So as someone who was homeschooled, Tim Tebow was a hero of mine. I think we're like the same age, but still. And Tim Tebow, people used to talk about, and they'd say, man, he's got that it factor of leadership. He's just born with it. He's got something just intangible in him. He's born with this idea of being this incredible leader. But leadership is actually not something that we're born with. It's not something reserved for a select few who have this incredible gift. Every one of us can be. So I'm talking to you both that we train leaders, and then each of you are leaders in yourself. So I think there's two ways we can approach this session today. One is for us to think about how we can train leaders in our classrooms, how we can make our students leaders. But I also want you to think in the back of your mind about how you can be a better leader, about how you can be a more virtuous leader as you approach your relationships of intentional influence. We also see that leadership is, and there's a ton of leadership theory that backs this up, it is a developable skill set. Everybody can become a better leader. And it's also something that's relational. Leadership happens in relationship with others. If you're alone in a cave, I think there's something with Aristotle with that, right? Plato? See, that's how little philosophy I know. I just wanted to throw just a reminder of how little philosophy I know. I can see a lone tear rolling down Brian's cheek as I say that. If you're alone in a cave, you're probably not leading because there's no relationship there. I guess you could create voices and characters in your head, still probably not leadership. Now, what is virtue? Going to what we talked about yesterday, a little bit of review. There are two types of virtues. This is a blank on your sheet. By the way, a lot of these are blanks on your sheet, so if you haven't been keeping up, let me know and I can go back. We have two types of virtue. We have intellectual virtue and we have moral virtue. Intellectual virtue is a disposition to reliably respond emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally to a particular kind of challenge in ways that promote attunement to reality and possible realities. And we have moral virtue. Moral virtue is a disposition to reliably respond emotionally, cognitively, behaviorally to a particular kind of challenge in ways that create, sustain, and or repair moral relationships. These are relationships based on trust rather than relationships of coercion. So, what is virtuous leadership? It's simply this. Virtuous leadership is a disposition to reliably respond emotionally, cognitively, and behaviorally to particular kinds of challenges in a way that promotes attunement to reality while creating, sustaining, and or repairing relationships of intentional influence. I think that encapsulates it pretty well. I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit because I want to make sure you remember it. And so the shorter version is this. Virtuous leadership is a disposition to reliably respond in a relationship of intentional influence. We want people to have the right intellectual and moral behaviors as they engage in a relationship of intentional influence. So what do virtuous leaders do? We want to look at a couple of the behaviors of virtuous leaders. So these are the top 10 leadership competencies. This is a survey done by the Harvard Business Review. And so I want to give you a minute to look. Can you all read that? Is that font big enough for you to read? I'll read it out loud for those of you in the back. So there are 5 categories: strong ethics and safety, self-organizing, efficient learning, nurtures growth, and connection and belonging. Those are the 5 categories. The behaviors, before I read them, let me get to what we're doing with these. I want you to think about what stands out and what virtues there could be that could apply to these leadership competencies. So be putting your virtue hat on. We learned about virtue yesterday. And as we read through these competencies, think if there's any that have virtue standing out. So we'll just go through them one at a time. Has high ethical and moral standards. Is there a virtue component to that? Yes? I would argue there is. Provides goals and objectives with loose guidelines and direction. I think we probably could find some virtue in that. If you have a specific virtue and you read it and you're like, I know this. My operating theory always and forever is this. All of us are smarter than any of us. So as we work together today, this is a collaboration. It's a conversation I'm dominating, but it's a conversation nonetheless. So if we're going through this and you're like, I know a virtue that applies to that, shout it out. We're in a conversation here. I trust each of you. You all have something valuable to bring. So, clearly communicates expectations. I think we can think of virtues that tie into that. Flexibility to change options, committed to ongoing training, communicates openly and honestly, is open to new ideas and approaches, creates a feeling of succeeding and failing together, helps grow into a next generation leader, and provides safety for trial and errors. Those are the leadership competencies that Harvard Business Review in their survey of business leaders found were the most important. Here's where I really want to get into the meat of it though. What leaders do. These are the 5 practices of exemplary leadership from Barry Posner and James Kouzes in the Leadership Challenge. If you've spent 45 seconds talking with me about leadership in a private conversation, I've referenced this book. If you were going to read one leadership book, The Leadership Challenge by Barry Posner and James Kouzes is my #1 recommendation. If you want to get deep into theory, you can read Peter Northouse, but please don't. It's like reading the dictionary. This is great. So we have 5 practices. The practices are this: model the way, inspire to share vision, challenge the process, enables others to act, and encourage the heart. Why should we develop virtuous leaders? This is not part of our learning objectives. This is just something I deeply care about. We do this because we're all going to make the world a better place. We all have the opportunity. We can wake up every day and know, today I'm going to change the world. Not many other careers get to do that. Not many people get to wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to change the world today. Superman gets to do it. Batman doesn't get to do it. You get to do it. So you're better than Batman, almost Superman. And it looks like this. Students become virtuous leaders. Virtuous leaders create healthier organizations. Healthier organizations create a healthier society. We're going to change the world as we do this. I believe in each and every one of you have the power to do something incredible. I hope you lean into this. I hope you lean into this model, because we can all do something to make the world a better place. And if that's not reason to get out of bed and do this every day, I don't know what is. Thank you guys so much for your time. That is exactly on time. Good job, everybody.